All right, so let's dive right into the details of the BIO259 exam. Dr. Rosario, can you give our listeners a quick overview of what they should expect for exam one?
Absolutely. So the exam is coming up next Wednesday, and it's going to cover everything we've gone through up to cellular respiration. That's about 3 weeks of material to review, and here's the kicker. It's a strict no notes policy.
Wait, hold up. No notes at all? Not even a cheat sheet?
Nope, not even a cheat sheet. It's designed that way to encourage understanding and retention, not just looking up answers. Students will need to bring a pencil for the multiple choice format, which will all be done on paper, and they'll have 50 minutes for 50 questions, so 1 minute per question. Pretty tight timing.
Okay, that's great to know. Now, for anyone who's feeling a little overwhelmed or maybe hasn't been following along as closely as they should, are there any recommended resources or strategies for catching up?
Absolutely, Eric. First, we've got tutoring available. There are tutors who've taken the same class before, so they know the ropes. There's a registration link on D2L for anyone who wants to sign up.
That sounds helpful. And what about study tips?
Hands down, my biggest tip is to use the study guide. Seriously, it's your best friend. Try filling it out from memory first to see what you truly know, then go back and compare it to your notes. It's an effective way to pinpoint gaps in your understanding.
That's good to hear. So, tutoring and study guides. I mean, it sounds like there are plenty of tools to set everyone up for success.
That's the goal. I really want students to feel prepared and confident walking into that exam.
All right, Dr. Rosario, we've covered a lot about gearing up for the exam. Now let's shift gears to one of the key concepts students will need to understand: cellular transport. Can you start by breaking down what makes passive transport unique?
Oh, passive transport is fascinating. You've got no energy expenditure, zero ATP. It's like this effortless highway where molecules just move from high concentration to low concentration. We call that going down the concentration gradient.
So it just happens?
Exactly. Imagine spilling coffee. It spreads out naturally, right? Same with molecules inside your body. One form is simple diffusion, where small nonpolar molecules like oxygen just pass through the cell membrane freely.
Okay, but what about bigger or charged molecules? They probably can't just stroll through, right?
Right? That's when facilitated diffusion comes in. It still doesn't use energy, but larger or polar molecules need a little help. They use protein channels or carriers, kind of like tunnels that guide them through the cell membrane. For example, glucose can't just waltz in, it needs a transporter.
Gotcha. So passive is all about that no effort required vibe. But active transport is the opposite?
Totally. Active transport is like carrying a boulder uphill. It takes energy, usually in the form of ATP, because you're moving molecules against their concentration gradient from low concentration to high. A great example is the sodium-potassium pump, which keeps your nerve cells firing properly by pumping sodium out and potassium in.
That pump always seems to come up in biology. Why is it such a big deal?
Well, it's essential for maintaining cellular homeostasis. It makes sure concentrations inside and outside the cell stay balanced. Think of it as maintaining a charged battery to keep your nervous system powered. Without it, communication between nerve cells would break down.
That makes sense. So let me throw a practical scenario at you. Say someone's working out. How does this all tie into hydration and muscle function?
Great question. During exercise, osmosis, which is just water moving across the cell membrane, plays a big role. As your muscle cells work harder, they create waste like lactic acid, increasing the concentration gradient. Water then moves where it's needed to balance things out. Staying hydrated ensures that process keeps running smoothly, preventing cramps and fatigue.
So water's not just about cooling down. It's like a key part of keeping everything balanced inside your cells.
Exactly. Without it, cells can lose shape, shrivel, or even burst if the balance goes too far. And that brings us full circle. You can see how active and passive transport mechanisms are vital to keeping cells alive and functioning, especially during intense activity.
Dr. Rosario, we've covered a solid foundation with cellular transport and how it keeps our cells balanced. But now, let's hit the real powerhouse topic: cellular respiration. Can you break down why it's the lifeline for our cells?
Absolutely, Eric. Cellular respiration is pretty much the cornerstone of energy production in our cells. It's all about taking glucose, the sugar we get from food, and converting it into ATP, the energy currency our cells depend on for everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, like muscle contractions, repairing tissues, even active transport.
And this process has multiple steps, right? Can you break it down for us?
Sure. The first step is glycolysis, which happens outside of the mitochondria. This is where glucose is split into two molecules of pyruvic acid. Even though it's the first step, it's special because it doesn't actually need oxygen or mitochondria to work. It's like the jump start to get things rolling, and you do get a small amount of ATP here.
Okay, so glycolysis kind of sets the stage. What happens after that?
Exactly. If oxygen is available, those pyruvic acids head into the mitochondria for the citric acid cycle, also called the Krebs cycle. Here, more energy is extracted, mainly in the form of high energy electrons carried by coenzymes. I like to picture them as tiny delivery trucks loaded with energy, zipping toward the next stage, the electron transport chain.
And that's the big finish, the electron transport chain?
You got it, Eric. This is where those electrons from our carrier trucks are used to create a proton gradient. I love calling this the energy waterfall. It's like building up potential energy at the top of a dam and then letting it rush down to spin a turbine. That turbine is ATP synthase, which makes the majority of ATP we need.
Ah, so that's how the bulk of our ATP is produced. But what's the role of oxygen in all this?
Oxygen is the key. It's the final electron acceptor at the end of the chain. Without oxygen, the whole system backs up like a traffic jam because there'd be nowhere for those electrons to go. And instead of making ATP, the entire process stalls, and we'd have to rely on less efficient methods like glycolysis to get our energy.
That's such a vivid way to explain it. I can see why cellular respiration is so vital. Now, you also mentioned the proton gradient earlier. How does that flow through relate to energy production?
Great question. Those protons accumulate on one side of the mitochondrial membrane, creating a gradient. They naturally want to flow back to the other side, and as they do, they power ATP synthase. Imagine water spinning a wheel. It's the flow of protons back into the mitochondrial matrix that drives ATP production, making the step incredibly efficient.
Incredible. And this entire system works 24/7 to keep us moving, thinking, and functioning?
Exactly. It's happening constantly in every cell of your body. It really underlines why a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients is so critical. Without these, you'd see systems start failing pretty fast.
And that's all powered by tiny organelles doing an enormous amount of work. Honestly, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. And understanding these systems not only sets students up for BIO259 success, but also gives a deeper appreciation for how our bodies function at the atomic level. It's amazing.
It really is. Well, I think we've unpacked a lot today. Thanks for sharing such brilliant insights, Dr. Rosario.
Thanks, Eric. And to everyone listening, good luck with your studies. Remember, understanding this stuff takes time, but it's absolutely worth it.
On that note, we hope you found today's episode helpful. Take care, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.